She told me, "Don't bring up marriage again. I don't want people thinking I settled." Then she burst out laughing, like she delivered the joke of the century. I just said, "Say no more." Her laughter died real fast when she stumbled across my dating profile a week later. Hey viewers, before we get deeper into the story, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button if you want more stories like this. Thanks. At first, the words barely registered. They floated between us over the flickering candlelight and the half-eaten plates of pasta, like a bad punchline waiting for context. Don't bring up marriage again. I don't want people thinking I'm settling. And that laugh, God, that laugh, hammered the words into my skull. It wasn't awkward or shy. It was loud, sharp, dismissive. A couple of people at nearby tables even turned to look. She laughed like she'd just told the greatest line of her life. "My name's Alex. Hers is Chloe. We were at Il Ponte, an upscale Italian place she'd been nagging me to try for months. I booked the reservation a week ahead. The warm lights shimmered off her wine glass and the silver bracelet I'd gotten her for her birthday. I thought the whole evening was perfect, romantic even. I'd spent the entire day working up the nerve to suggest we start browsing engagement rings together. My fork, loaded with fettuccine, stalled halfway to my mouth. I slowly set it down. "What?" I asked. Chloe took a slow sip of her Pinot Noir, still smirking like she'd just shared a private joke with herself. "You heard me. All that future talk. It's too heavy, too official." My brain scrambled to piece things together. This had to be a bad joke, right? Terrible timing? Some kind of misunderstanding? "I was just talking about us, about the future we've been building," I said quietly, trying to reel her back from whatever bizarre place she'd gone. "You know, a home, maybe a family." She sighed. The long, irritated kind people give a kid who won't stop asking if we're there yet. "Ugh, Alex, not again. Our life is fine, it's good. Why ruin it by labeling it? Why turn everything into something permanent?" A cold knot twisted in my stomach. This wasn't humor. It wasn't confusion. There was something real, something sour behind her expression. "Because I love you," I said, the words suddenly feeling small and pathetic. "I thought you felt the same. Don't you want that with me?" She leaned in, lowering her voice to a whisper that felt somehow more vicious than yelling. "Look, you're a good guy, reliable, comfortable. But marriage?" She reclined back in her chair, another burst of cruel laughter escaping. "I don't want people thinking I'm settling." She shook her head slowly, eyes bright with amusement, as if the mere idea of marrying me was comedy gold. "Seriously, can you imagine? My friends would never stop roasting me for settling." The word settling hit me like a punch to the ribs, knocking the breath straight out of me. It wasn't just that she didn't want to get married. It was that the thought of being officially tied to me somehow lowered her social stock. To her, I was the placeholder boyfriend, the warm-up act, the guy you date until something more impressive finally shows up. I stared at her, really stared. At the woman I'd spent 4 years loving, the woman I'd cared for through fevers, celebrated victories with, whose family had practically adopted me for holidays. I took in her perfectly shaped brows, the flawless lipstick, and the absolute confidence in her eyes that she wasn't saying anything unreasonable. The restaurant's clinking silverware and soft jazz dissolved into background static. All I could hear was the echo of her laugh and the quiet, brutal collapse of everything I thought we were. It felt like a glass sculpture hitting concrete, beautiful, fragile, and now completely ruined. I stayed silent. I didn't argue. What would I even say? "Please don't think I'm the guy you settled for." The shame was too sharp, too complete. I lifted my hand slightly, catching the waiter's eye, making a small writing gesture. He understood immediately. "What?" Chloe finally asked, her grin faltering when she saw my face. "You're not seriously going to get weird about this, right?" I just looked at her, my expression smooth and unreadable. Inside, something cold and steady was taking over, spreading through me like a deep winter frost. The waiter returned with the bill. I pulled out my card, slipped it into the leather folder without checking the amount, and handed it back. "Alex, come on, say something." I pushed my chair back, the scrape of wood against tile slicing through the quiet around us. It sounded strangely final. "Where are you going?" she asked, now sounding less amused and more unsettled. I met her eyes. My voice came out flat, drained of everything: hurt, hope, love, just empty acceptance. The kind of tone you'd use to excuse yourself after a stranger brushed past you. "Say no more," I told her. "I understand you completely." Then I turned and walked out, leaving her sitting at the table alone, the candle still flickering between the 2 empty plates. Her words no longer sounded like a joke. They stood there like a gravestone for what we used to be. The drive home as wrapped in silence. The only noise was the steady hum of the engine and the faint hiss of tires on the road. Chloe sat stiffly in the passenger seat, arms tightly folded, glaring out the window as streetlights streaked by. Her anger radiated off her like heat from an open flame, hitting the cold numbness inside me without melting anything. Settling. The word kept looping through my mind, but the sting was gone, burned away by the brutal clarity of her honesty. There were no mixed signals left, nothing to interpret, no hidden softness behind her tone. Just the truth, undeniable and final. The truth sat between us, harsh and cold, as glaring as a surgical light. She finally spoke as I pulled into our parking spot. "Seriously? You're going to act like this, pouting because I was honest?" I shut off the engine. The sudden stillness felt absolute. I looked at her, really looked. Seeing the entitlement carved into the tilt of her chin, this wasn't someone who felt she had wounded her partner. This was someone irritated, that her partner wasn't conveniently unbothered by her truth. "I'm not sulking," I said evenly, and it was true. "Then what would you call it? The silent treatment?" "Real mature, Alex." I didn't respond. I stepped out of the car and headed toward our apartment. Her door slammed behind me, louder than necessary, like punctuation on her annoyance. Inside, everything felt wrong. The couch we'd chosen together, the prints we'd framed, the blanket her mother knitted. It all looked like props on a stage after the actors had gone home. I kept waiting for the metaphorical curtains to drop. The next morning, I woke before my alarm. I hadn't slept, just floated in a numb, half-conscious drift. Chloe was still asleep, turned away from me. I got up, showered, and dressed for work with mechanical precision. She shifted as I tied my shoes, rolling toward me with sleepy irritation. Her voice was thick with grogginess and practiced dismissal. "So you're going to act like a child over this all day?" I stood, looking at her. There was no anger left, no sadness, just a wide, flat certainty spreading through me. "No," I said quietly, firmly. "Say no more. I understand everything now." I walked out of the bedroom, grabbed my keys and laptop bag and left. No goodbye kiss, no lingering glance, just the clean break of a door closing behind me. At work, I was physically present and mentally absent. I sat through meetings, answered emails, nodded at updates, but internally I was drawing up the plans for my exit. During lunch, I didn't bother eating. I stepped outside and called Ben, my oldest friend. "Hey man, what's going on?" He greeted, cheerful. "I need a favor," I said bluntly. "Can I crash with you for a bit?" The lightness left his voice instantly. "What happened?" "Chloe said the quiet part out loud last night," I replied. "She told me she doesn't want to get married because she doesn't want people thinking she's settling." I explained the whole thing in the same steady, emotionless tone I'd had since waking. No quiver, no resentment, just facts laid out like a report. There was a heavy pause, then a low whistle. "Holy Alex, that is unbelievably. I'm really sorry." "It's okay," I said, and I meant it. "Better to know." "So tonight?" he asked. "Yeah. If that's all right." "Of course. Stay as long as you need." "Do you want me to come over and help you pack?" "No, I've got it handled. Thanks, Ben." That evening, I told Chloe I'd be staying late at work. It was the first and only lie I told through the entire unraveling. Instead of clocking extra hours, I drove straight to Ben's place. He gave my shoulder a firm slap, handed me a beer, and didn't pry. His quiet, steady presence felt like the only solid thing in the strange calm that had settled over my life. Sitting on his couch, I opened my laptop. What I was about to do didn't feel spiteful. It felt necessary, like finally inhaling after holding my breath for too long. I pulled up Tinder. Creating a profile felt oddly procedural, like completing paperwork for a new role titled Single Man. I chose a recent picture from a hike with Ben. Sun in my eyes, a real smile on my face, uncomplicated happiness. My bio wasn't dramatic or showy. I didn't try to craft an impressive persona. I typed simply, easygoing guy who loves hiking, awful movies, and great coffee, hoping to meet new people and see where things lead. Every word was honest. It was me, unfiltered, unedited, not shrunk down by Chloe's constant judgment, the man she chalked up as merely comfortable. Hitting complete profile didn't feel rebellious. It felt like reclaiming something I'd forgotten belonged to me. Over the next 3 days, I became a quiet shadow in the apartment, moving intentionally, almost invisibly. When Chloe was gone, at work or out with friends, I packed the essentials, documents, laptop, the books I'd read over and over, the watch my father had given me, and about 2/3 of my clothes. I left the furniture, the TV, the kitchen items. They belonged to a version of my life that no longer existed. On the 4th day, I carried out the final box. I stood in the living room for a moment. It felt hollow, stripped of meaning, even though all the familiar objects remained. I set my apartment key on the kitchen counter beside the fruit bowl she adored. An hour later, while I was unpacking at Ben's, my phone buzzed. A Tinder notification. A match. I felt a faint, unfamiliar twinge, something that wasn't pain, potential, a spark of life returning. Then another buzz, a text from Chloe. The shock in her words was almost palpable. Chloe, what the hell is this? Is this supposed to be funny? You're on Tinder? I read it, absorbed the outrage simmering beneath the words, and felt nothing. No guilt, no triumph, just the steady hum of a new life forming quietly in front of me. I didn't block her. I didn't respond. I slipped my phone back into my pocket, her fury still glowing on the screen, and kept unpacking. I was learning that silence was the strongest tool I had. It was becoming my refuge. For the first 2 weeks, living at Ben's place felt like being wrapped in peace. Messages from Chloe arrived in erratic bursts of anger. Chloe, day 2, I can't believe you're actually doing this. You left over one conversation. You're insane. Chloe, day 5, my friends are right. You're a narcissist. This is textbook narcissistic discard. You just needed an excuse. Chloe, day 8, you left your dumb hiking boots. I'm donating them. Hope you get blisters. I read every message, still didn't block her. Watching the shift from fury to confused fishing was like observing a slow-motion weather map, her emotional storm unraveling in real time. It wasn't personal anymore. It was just information, not my responsibility. Ben's couch was temporary, but it was peace. After a week, I found a quiet one-bedroom on the opposite side of the city and signed a 6-month lease. It was small, clean, and entirely mine. The empty walls felt like potential, not confinement. I bought a bed, a desk, and one comfortable chair. The minimalism felt like a balm. I didn't rush into dating. My Tinder profile was still active. I'd reply to a few messages here and there. I even grabbed a coffee with a gentle, thoughtful woman named Rachel, a librarian. It wasn't some cinematic love-at-first-sight moment, just an easy conversation with someone who didn't know the old chapters of my life, someone who didn't see me as a stepping stone or a downgrade. It felt normal, refreshing, proof that the world wasn't full of people who viewed me as a consolation prize. Without the emotional drain of managing Chloe's volatility, I had energy again, real, steady energy. I threw myself into work, finished a project ahead of schedule, and my usually stoic boss paused at my desk. You've been really on top of things lately, Alex. It shows. It was the first professional praise in years that didn't feel dulled by exhaustion. This was my life now. Quiet, focused, entirely my own. Chloe's mocking laugh, once a ghost in my mind, was fading, replaced by the concrete satisfaction of rebuilding myself from the ground up. The first real fracture in her composure came 3 weeks after I left. My phone lit up with her name. I let it ring 4 times. Then, out of detached curiosity, I picked up. I said nothing at first. Her voice was tight, overly controlled. We need to talk. You can't just disappear. I'm here, I said evenly, like someone answering a customer service line. You blew everything out of proportion, she began, the rationalizing kicking in. What I said at dinner, it didn't come out right. You know I love you. The words were clear, I replied, using the same calm, factual tone from that night. The laugh was even clearer. I heard her inhale sharply. So you're going to throw away 4 years over one sentence? You're seriously that sensitive? You can't handle a bit of honesty? It wasn't a sentence, I said, the realization solidifying as I spoke. It was the truth, and it's a truth I needed. So, thank you. I ended the call. No dramatics, no shouting. Just a quiet click. I imagined her staring at the phone, feeling the first cold edge of consequence, something her tears and charm couldn't patch over. A week later came the next phase, pleading. Her voicemail was thick with tears, stripped of all her usual control. Please, Alex, everything's falling apart without you. I can't sleep. I was stupid. I was scared, okay? Scared. I do want to marry you. I was just worried about what people would think. That's my issue, not yours. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Please call me. Please. I listened to it a single time. The best thing that ever happened to her, yet somehow never good enough for her to acknowledge. The hypocrisy almost bordered on art. I deleted the voicemail. The sound of her crying, which once would have shattered me, now felt like rain tapping against a distant window. Something happening out there, not to me. Then came the final stage, anger. The mask slipping after manipulation and pity didn't get the reaction she wanted. The text started on a Friday night. Chloe, 9:14 p.m. My friends think you must have been cheating on me. Is that it? Were you waiting to jump to someone else? Was that librarian from your profile already lined up? I didn't reply. The accusation was so transparent, so desperate, it was almost entertaining. Chloe, 9:47 p.m. So you're really going to ghost me? After everything, after 4 years? You're a coward. A spineless coward who can't even talk like an adult. My silence was a void she was clawing at, trying to stuff with whatever noise she could muster. Chloe, 10:23 p.m. Fine. If I don't hear from you tonight, we're done forever. Do you hear me? Done. Don't call me. Don't come to my place. We are over. I read the last message, a thin, dry smile forming. She was trying to break up with me. She was performing a funeral for a relationship whose body I had buried and walked away from weeks earlier. The power shift was absolute. She was shouting into a void, trying to claim an ending I had already authored. I put my phone on silent, picked up my book, and spent the night in the quiet, satisfying peace of my own company. Her unraveling was her burden now. My life was finally beginning again. 3 months to the day after I walked out of Il Ponte, I stood on the edge of Tom and Sierra's yard, a cold beer sweating in my hand, surrounded by the soft hum of a summer barbecue. I almost skipped the invite, but Tom was a real friend, and avoiding people felt too much like I was still running. I wasn't. I was simply living. I'd spent the morning in my new workshop, sanding a live-edge walnut slab for a custom desk. The scent of sawdust and linseed oil felt more like home than the apartment I'd shared with Chloe ever die. I threw on a clean t-shirt and jeans, and when I caught my reflection in the patio door, I barely recognized the man staring back. He looked calm. The tension that lived in my shoulders during our final year was gone. My skin was bronzed from weekend hikes. My eyes held a clarity I hadn't seen in a long time. And then I saw her. Chloe stood near the food table, clutching a plastic cup of wine. She was talking to Sierra, but her posture was stiff, her eyes scanning the crowd in restless sweeps. She looked thinner, almost fragile. Her smile was stretched too wide, too practiced, never reaching her eyes. Like she was acting, and the role was wearing her down. Our eyes met across the lawn. Hers widened with startled recognition, darted away, then snapped back with a frantic, hungry shine. I offered a small, cordial nod, the kind you'd give to someone you barely knew, and turned back to my conversation with Ben. I could feel her stare drilling into my back. For an hour I mingled. I laughed at Tom's awful jokes, talked sports, listened to Sierra ramble about her garden. I was present, I was steady, and the whole time I felt Chloe circling closer, like a fading satellite pole. Ed toward a planet whose gravity had changed. She finally approached when I walked over to grab another beer from a cooler tucked away on the far side of the deck. Her perfume, the one I bought her for her birthday, drifted toward me like a ghost from a life I no longer lived. "Alex," she said. I turned. Up close, the strain was unmistakable. New fine lines at the corners of her eyes, a tightness around her mouth. She looked tired, thinner than I remembered. "Chloe," I said with a small nod as I popped the cap off my bottle. "You look good," she murmured, her voice unsteady. "Thanks. You too." It was the kind of polite nicety that meant nothing, a reflex more than a sentiment. She inhaled shakily, then dove straight in. "I meant what I said in my messages. I was stupid. Completely stupid. I've been miserable." I took a slow sip of my beer, the cool condensation dampening my fingers. "I'm sorry to hear that." The phrase sounded right, but there was no real weight behind it. "I was sorry in the way you're sorry to hear about a traffic jam you're not stuck in." Her expression tightened at my tone. "It's been awful. Everything just fell apart after you left. She used, clearly waiting for me to fill the silence, to ask questions, to offer sympathy she used to take for granted. I didn't. I simply waited. "I do want to marry you," she finally blurted, the words tumbling out frantic and thin. "I was just scared. Scared of what people would say. It was my insecurity, not your fault. Please believe me, you're the best thing that ever happened to me." There it was, the same script from her voicemail, now delivered face to face. But I wasn't the same audience anymore. I looked at her, the woman who once held every part of me, then let it slip through her hands like it meant nothing. What I felt wasn't love or hurt. It was a distant kind of sadness for who she'd chosen to be. "It's strange," I said softly, my voice calm, almost conversational. "That night, you were terrified of settling." She frowned. "What are you talking about?" "It made me realize I was settling," I said. "Settling for someone who treated my love like a burden, for someone who cared more about being judged by her friends than about the man who was standing beside her. I was shrinking myself just so you wouldn't feel insecure, and I decided I wasn't going to live like that anymore." The color drained from her cheeks. This wasn't the script she rehearsed. She expected a fight or forgiveness, not a quiet tearing down of every illusion she had about us. Her eyes flicked across the deck, grasping for something to throw back at me, and landed on the woman who had smiled at me earlier. "Oh, so you're dating now?" she snapped, venom returning. That girl you were talking to, she's just a rebound. You don't get over 4 years in 3 months? I followed her gaze. Lena, a graphic designer I'd met through work. We'd gone on a few dates. They were light, effortless. She was creative, independent, and she looked at me like someone worth understanding, not someone she was ashamed of standing next to. I turned back to Chloe, a small, genuine smile forming. Actually, I'm not dating anyone seriously. I'm just happy. The word hit the air between us like a verdict. I'm building a life, I added, where I don't have to worry about my partner feeling embarrassed of me. It's been nice, peaceful. I finished the last of my beer and set the empty bottle on the railing. The conversation had run its course. I hope you find what you're looking for, Chloe, honestly. But we're done here. As I walked away, Lena caught my eye and lifted her bottle in a subtle toast. I found myself moving toward her without hesitation, leaving Chloe standing by the cooler, small and silent. I was halfway across the deck when I heard her voice one last time, a broken whisper trying to sound angry. You were my safe bet. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I just kept walking toward the easy smile and the gentle conversation waiting ahead. Behind me, the chatter of the party blurred into background noise. The weight I'd carried for years? Gone. She wasn't the villain anymore, just a chapter I'd finished, a hard lesson that taught me my own value, and for that, I guess I owed her a quiet thank you. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. What did you think of this story? Share your thoughts in the comments.